We are going to run out of food again. It doesn't matter how much food they come back with. It's just a matter of time. Rick is holding a meeting in Alexandria. This is just days after part of the wall has collapsed, leading to people our survivors cared about to die, including the leader of Alexandria, which put Rick officially and solely in charge. And after battling the largest horde of walkers they have ever seen, right in the streets of Alexandria like gladiators, they now face their worst enemy, and it isn't one they can simply defeat. They're facing starvation. In this meeting, they prep plans for farming, and when it concludes, everyone goes to bed down for the night. Rick visits with Carl, who is dealing with his recent injury. Outside of Alexandria, a mystery man watches Alexandria through his binoculars. The next day, Michonne and Abraham check the perimeter. After some small talk, Michonne cuts down a few walkers, and that same mystery man leaps out of a car with his hands in the air. Michonne points her katana at him and asks who he is. Within seconds, the situation goes crazy. The man disarms her, Abe aims his gun and fires, and the man manages to Hollywood-style duck and dive away from a machine gun spitting 50 bullets. Then he Bruce Lee's Abe in the face, and he gets the upper hand, screaming, "Take me to your leader." Michonne will come back with Rick, and the man introduces himself as Paul, Jesus Monroe. Jesus tells them that he comes from a community of 200 survivors about 20 miles away. He was scouting the area after dropping off some supplies at 2 other communities. Now, we will only end up seeing the one community, but it is reasonable to assume that Jesus is talking about a savior outpost for the other. He goes to say the communities trade, and his community is built around a farm, and they have food, clothing, and tools to trade for much needed ammunition. Jesus goes on to tell Rick that he'll take him to his community to see what they have to offer and meet their leader, Kenneth. Now, some fans call this a misprint or a mistake, because the leader's name is really Gregory, but Jesus will later admit to lying a little bit to protect them in case Rick's group is bad. So it's safe to assume Jesus used a fake name. Rick now is looking at a miracle. They were facing certain starvation, and here is a man who can bring them to a farming community. And since it worked so well the first time he met Aaron, Rick knocks Jesus out. They tie up the new stranger and they prepare Alexandria for an attack. Rick leads a group out to search for Jesus' group, but they don't find anyone, and Rick, Michonne, and Abraham look out over the landscape, and there they decide to see if Jesus is actually telling the truth. Rick, Michonne, Andrea, Glenn, and Carl will eventually travel in a van to Jesus' community. During this trip, Jesus will help them fight walkers, push a car out of the way, and Rick slowly begins to trust him a little bit more. Now, Jesus doesn't take them right to his community. He instructs them to pull over so he could take a piss, and Rick discovers that he was able to get out of his restraints the entire time. A shocked Rick looks at Jesus while he explains that he was testing Rick and he passed. Jesus trusted him, and now Jesus is asking Rick to trust him. And the spot where he asked him to pull over at turns out to be the Hilltop. The inside of the Hilltop is very impressive. They will enter a house. It's a large building that has been converted into living quarters for different people. Rick just briefly meets their leader, Gregory. A resident will interrupt them almost immediately, running into the house, yelling, "Ethan is back." They all run outside to see a crying man telling them Negan has a message for Gregory, and then that man jams a knife right in Gregory's side. Out of instinct, Rick immediately tackles the knife-wielding resident, and they struggle in the mud. Rick calls out for somebody to help and grab Ethan off of him, but Ethan screams that anyone getting in his way is hurting Crystal. Rick pushes the knife up and into Ethan's throat, silencing him, as a waterfall of blood falls all over Rick. He stands up, not sure why people are looking at him like a monster. He doesn't know what is going on. He He doesn't know what forced Ethan to try to kill, so Jesus brings his group inside to fill them in. Jesus at first is worried about scaring Carl, and Rick says, "Nah, fuck that, you ain't gonna scare him. He might scare you." Jesus will go on to explain that when the walls finally went up, a man came named Negan. He is the leader of a nasty group of people called the Saviors. He met with Gregory and he made a lot of threats and a lot of demands, and Gregory, being non-confrontational, agreed to give them half of their supplies. In exchange, the Saviors would not attack the Hilltop, and they would keep the area outside of the Hilltop clear of all walkers. Rick uses this opportunity to make a deal with Gregory for much needed food and supplies. Rick and the survivors will take care of this savior scum, and they plan on quickly removing Negan from the equation. You see, after Rick barely escaped the prison with his life and Carl's life, he survived in the wild, on the move, dealing with the roamers, biting a man's throat out. He dealt with the butchering hunters without even breaking a sweat. He took over Alexandria, fought in the open against the biggest walker horde he has ever faced. Now, Rick is confident they're just going to eliminate these saviors like it ain't shit. However, Rick is overconfident, and he completely underestimates this thug named Negan. You see, Rick views Negan and the Saviors as a small bump in the road to progress and survival. But when Negan shows up, he's gonna teach Rick that the Saviors are something to fear.